Hello everybody, my name is Ilya.
And my name is Tyler. Together we make up Kovray, a couple that loves to play board games.
Especially ones with thinky, crunchy dice.
Yeah, we like a lot of games.
We do. Today we're going to be taking a look at
The White Castle. This game is published by Devir, it's designed by Shei S and Isra C, and we're really excited to show this one to you today.
Now this is a spiritual successor to Red Cathedral, and essentially in this game you're going to be placing dice strategically to try to score the most points in a really tight resource management game. But let's give you a quick overview of how to play. White Castle is a board game set in 18th century Japan where players lead their clans to gain favor in the White Castle. The objective is to earn victory points through dice drafting and resource management over 3 rounds, in which players have 3 turns each. As always, you'll begin by setting up. Each player gets a player board, wooden resource cubes, food, iron, and mother of pearl, and wooden meeples, courtiers, gardeners, and warriors. The main board is set up with various cards, tokens, and dice for a variable game setup. On your turn, you'll do the following. You'll choose a die from the leftmost or rightmost step in one of the bridges. You'll place the chosen die into a valid die placement space on the board. You'll pay or gain coins based on the difference between the numbers on the placed die and the one that it covers. Now if you took the die from the leftmost space, you'll also gain the lantern bonus. You'll then take any valid actions in the location you've chosen. These can be in the castle, the well, outside the castle, or in your personal domains. Let's quickly go over the actions. Castle actions are determined by the color of the die placed. You can carry out the action or actions associated to your die color. These often grant you resources and sometimes will allow you to take principal actions by paying a daimyo seal. Well actions are unrestricted spaces which allow you to gain a daimyo seal and resources. Principal actions are the core of the game. They involve deploying meeples to the bridges, castle, or training yards. Lastly, personal domains actions usually will cost you coins unless you're placing a 6. But will grant you any uncovered resources and corresponding action on the action card. These spaces become more powerful as the game progresses. Now let's briefly talk about the principal actions. Warrior meeples will require iron to be placed. When placed, you're able to carry out the action or actions of the corresponding space. For each warrior in a training yard, you'll score points for meeples in the castle of your own color. In the castle, you can always take one or both of the actions listed here. The first action you can take is paying 2 coins to request an audience, essentially placing a meeple at the gates. The other actions, you can pay 2 or 5 mother of pearl to advance your meeples already there, or socially climb in the castle. Now if you land on the first or second floor, you're able to replace the card you currently have in your action slot with the card you land on, transferring your old card to the lantern rewards and replacing the empty space with a new card. The highest space of the castle will grant you bonuses, and each of the stages will score you victory points at the end of the game. Lastly, the gardener action requires a specific amount of food to be paid to place a meeple on one of the 6 cards around the bridges, which don't already have a member of your own clan. Once placed, you'll be able to take the corresponding action. At the end of the round, after all the players have taken 3 turns, you'll rearrange the turn order based on the passage of time track. Gardeners may get additional bonuses if any bridges have dice remaining on them. And lastly, you'll gather and reset all dice for the next round. You'll keep playing until the game ends after the 3 rounds. Now you're ready to score. Points will be awarded for reaching certain steps of passage of time track, the position of the gardeners, courtiers, and warriors, 1 point for every 5 daimyo seals and money, and points for leftover basic resources. You'll compare the scores and the player with the most points wins. Will you outsmart your opponents?
What did you think?
I found it really fun. I hesitate to say that because I think there's so much planning ahead and strategic decisions that need to be made in this game. I found myself, the game really went by quickly, but the ability to do so many different things and how everything is interconnected just blew my mind.
Yeah, it definitely pulls you in a lot of different directions, which can be both a negative and a positive. But I did have a lot of fun playing this game. At 2 players, the game is very quick, or at least it feels like it is. And then as you progress, which we'll talk about in a little bit here, the game changes a little bit, and that's kind of a nice feeling to have in a game. But overall, really enjoyed the thinkiness of this game and just the flow of it. It seemed relatively like, once you decided what you wanted to do, it was easy to follow that path, but the part that's difficult is making that decision.
And in theory, not in theory. In fact, you only have 9 turns in this game.
Yeah.
So that is so, like, every turn matters. Every decision matters. What you do is so important. And I like that. I think it left me wanting for more, and it was really easy to come back to as well.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that kind of leads us to our conversation about why people might like this game.
Well, if you like tight resource management, this is your golden child.
Yeah.
It is like the definition of tight resource management, in my opinion, because every little thing, like I just said, you do does matter. And how you save up and how you utilize your resources, how you decide to save and what to invest in will really lead to the outcome of your game and how you'll do in it.
Yeah, I 100% agree. There's times where like doing a move simply just to get like that extra resource is way more important than maybe chaining some combos. However, my next point to this game and why you might enjoy it is there are those chain combos that feel really good. You might be taking an action that leads you into training some samurais or bringing some folks into the castle or making your gardeners, and then you'll bounce back and forth between those spaces, and it does feel really good, especially when you have enough resources to be able to accomplish every single one of them. And I think like my favorite so far is being able to place like 3 separate workers into the different zones based on what I was able to accomplish during that combo turn, I suppose you could say.
It feels so good when that happens. It's probably one of the highlights of this game, and when it does, like, even everyone around you wants to celebrate for you because it's just so, it's often difficult to make that happen.
Yeah.
And the last thing I'll mention here too is one of the reasons you want to check it out is if you really like planning ahead. Because this is a game where you could really lay out a roadmap for yourself. I'm going to get this, I'm going to go here, I'm going to get here. And you can really be on other players' turns, you can deeply think about all the different strategies and all the pathways you take and how you can potentially score the most points. Is it beneficial for you to try to advance in chart orders? You can get to a place first because Tyler's been claiming that space every single time. Maybe. So if you enjoy planning and getting really into those type of aspects in the game, this game will definitely be for you.
Yeah. And even to that point, like if you're looking for a game that offers a bit different strategy thinking, I think the game does evolve as you add more players to it. It's a 1 to 4 player game, and we've mostly just played it at 2 players, and it felt very like we never used the stacking of the dice ability, really.
Because you can't in 2 players.
Yeah, because it's not there. But then once you introduce it at a higher player count, it's very interesting to see then the difference of people using those different spaces multiple times and using the different colors. So it's really nice to see that change in game pace. Because there's so few spots, but now we're adding more dice, and then more players, of course, so they want to take those actions. It gives you a little bit more freedom or leeway almost to be able to like hope that that spot is still available for you to use. But again, like I said, it does evolve as more players come into it, and I think that's a really nice thing to have in a game.
Well, I think it even adds another layer of strategy because now all of a sudden if you're placing a die, you could be increasing the cost of that dice placement because you put a 6 and initially it was a 3. Now anyone who's playing a dice that's not a 6 will have to pay coins where maybe before they wouldn't have. So that other player interaction is just another strategy if you're playing with 3 or 4 players, which is really fun.
Yeah, there's a lot that can be said about that too, even just being able to like take the value of taking the die at the farther, the lower end where you get to activate your lantern ability. Like that alone is kind of incentive to grab that die, but like Ilya said, is then you reduce the cost of having to place into those spaces. So things to think about when you are playing it. Of course, though, there are probably some reasons that we want to highlight for you that you might want to consider not playing.
Yeah, you might not enjoy this game if you don't like your plans foiled. I think every single time we played this game, there's a pathway for me that is just perfect. It's the perfect move, and it's always in the 3rd round, one of the last rounds, potentially the last turn, and Tyler takes away the card that I need in order to activate it, or activates that spot. And it feels terrible.
Yeah.
Because, like, in my head, I'm like, this is exactly what I do. I have the resources. This is a perfect move for the last move. And all of a sudden, it gets taken away. I do have to settle for something less.
Yeah.
And usually there are a lot of other things I could do that still grant me points or get me to a space. But obviously having that plan foiled is not a great feeling. And if you don't enjoy that in games, this game will definitely not be for you.
Yeah, it's almost like you have to restrict your planning to a certain like steps ahead, a certain number of steps ahead.
Yeah.
But like at the same time, like Ilya said, there is plans can be foiled. And on top of that, there's a lot to think about. We talked about the combos and how they're really enjoyable in this game, but at the same time, each decision matters so much, and you'll notice that as you play the game over and over again, that you'll start to see yourself saying, if I place this here, then this happens, and this happens, and this happens. No, it won't work. And then you kind of get in this stuck spot where you're like, well, I could do this to do this later, and then the combination of what Ilya is saying with the planning together versus like trying to make the combo happen to really optimize your turn can get quite overwhelming at times. And I think that's just something that if you're not looking for in a game, to just keep your eye out for, and you might not necessarily enjoy this game because of that.
It is a quick game because every player has 9 turns, but I think where a lot of the downtime is you do think through your turns.
Yeah.
Like people won't often be like, this is exactly what I'm going to do, because the game adapts turn to turn as well. But I think that's the last point I'll mention too, is the end of the game sneaks up on you.
Yeah.
So you'll think like, and there's so much more that you want to do. There's so much more that you can do. And because there is a little bit of engine building as well, you unlock more of your board, you can do more in your own board. And near the end, you're just stuck because it's the last turn, and all of a sudden the plans didn't come to fruition. There's still so much more you can do. But I think that's also one of the definitions of a good engine builder as well. And those types of game, like leaving you wanting more.
Yeah.
But if you really want to have that glorious finish, that huge point count, it may not always work. So it'll leave you coming back to try again and again.
Yeah. And even to that point, like because it's got this engine building feel to it, you end up like having your first round and even part of the second round feeling a little slow, where your board is like kind of stagnant, and then once you start getting into the second round, third round, then you can really see like your engine start to work, the payoffs start to be realized. All this to say is it's a high cost, high reward game. So if you're not a person that's interested in that game, those types of games, because of the backlash, then the White Castle might not be for you.
Now, before we go into our final thoughts of the game, what do you think in comparison to Red Cathedral? If you were to compare the two and having played both now.
Yeah, I don't really know how I would compare them because they are very, very different. I think when you told me that it was like a spiritual successor to the game, I was like, oh, this will be really interesting to see how the two like collide. But I honestly can't really compare them. I don't think they're comparable in my head.
That's super fair. I feel really similarly. And I think that is how, like, this is how I would like to see spiritual successors, because I think in my head, the dice placement and the dice mechanic is kind of that thing that ties them together.
Yeah, there's like small core things.
Yeah. And they're very different games. You wouldn't really even necessarily connect them right off the bat. They're both fantastic games. They're definitely games that hit our table quite often. We really enjoy them, especially with the Red Cathedral's new expansion too. Just elevated the game so much. So I'm really excited to have White Castle be an addition to our collection.
Yeah, and I'm excited to show this one to more people. I think actually the one thing I'll say in comparison is this one, in my opinion, would be easier to show to people than Red Cathedral.
It is really, like, with even the depth of the game, it's actually fairly easy to teach, because on your turn you're just taking a dice, playing it, and then doing everything that you need to do that comes outside of it.
It's like a self-discovery game in my opinion, and the best part about those kinds of games is you'll get better and better as they go. But with that, what do we think of the White Castle?
I loved it.
Yeah.
I think I've said this so many times this year, but Devir Games has been knocking it out of the park, which each and every single game, I feel like this is no exception. I feel like it continues to elevate the quality, the production. Also the fact that they fit so much game into one box. Like, I love when games just to the very top. And the little bridges, the components, even like the extra for the round marker. I feel I really like this game. It's a game I can see ourselves playing quite a lot. primarily because there's so much strategy and heavy thinking in a quick amount of time.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I think that you nailed it there. The other thing that I would say that I don't even think we touched on in our review is that there's so much variety that can happen in this game with those little tokens that you end up replacing for what how the
game
cards are activated.
Oh, yeah.
So there can be cards where, or times where it's like placing a white die will activate 2 different spaces, and that's really cool to see. But other times it can be all 3 activations are separate. So it's nice to have those balances. It changes the game, and the variety of it really helps shine through. I think even that, to like our points before, it changes as you add more players to it. So there's a lot of value in this game. And like I said, and Ilya said, this game has been a lot of fun for us to play. We really enjoyed it, and we really enjoyed showing it to people. So.
Well, I think even to build on the variability and setup, because all the garden cards, the room cards, the castle cards, the tiles that go into like the training grounds, like everything is so variable. So every game is completely different.
Exactly.
But with that said, that is White Castle. For our question of the day, what is the game that has strained your brain the most that you've played? Which one do you think would be that for you? Do you think it'd be White Castle, or do you think there's another one?
Like maybe On Mars. Maybe On Mars,
that's
probably. Yeah.
I don't know if one comes specifically to my brain. Do you think one? Do you know one for me that strained my brain? That you saw me physically going.
On Mars.
On Mars does crunch the brain quite a bit. That is correct. Yeah. But this is definitely a brain cruncher contender too. But I'm very curious to see what everybody else says, because brain crunchy is a good crunchy.
Exactly. But if you like this video, of course, give us a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button if you're new here, because we make weekly board game content where we talk about games like this. And until then, we will see you in the next one. Bye!